Sometimes, the most powerful voices rise not from grand stages but from the forgotten corners of the world. What happens when a boy who sings for coins on the streets suddenly stands under the brightest spotlight of his life? Under the heavy lights of Ireland's Got Talent, a thin boy in a second-hand shirt stood silently, clutching a microphone that looked too big for his trembling hands. The audience whispered, curious and doubtful. Who was he? Just another hopeful among thousands, or something more? Back in the slums of Manila, Rafael's songs had no microphones, no cameras, no applause. His voice echoed through narrow alleys, blending with the hum of tricycles and the cries of street vendors. Each note he sang was a silent prayer, for food, for hope, for his ailing grandmother who waited for him every night. He never imagined his voice would travel beyond those crowded streets. Yet, here he was, oceans away from home, standing before Simon Cowell, the man whose eyes had judged legends. The stage fell silent. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. The judges leaned forward, expecting nervous failure or childish talent. But as the first note escaped Rafael's lips, something shifted. The room softened. The whispers died. That voice, pure, trembling, and golden, filled the air like sunlight breaking through clouds. It wasn't just a performance, it was a cry from a boy who had known hunger, loss, and love deeper than most. As the final note lingered, you could see it, the rare glimmer in Simon's eyes. The audience didn't just hear a song, they felt a story. And in that moment, one question burned in everyone's heart. How could a boy with nothing sound like an angel who had seen heaven? Rafael Cruz had lived most of his 17 years beneath the gray skies of Manila, where dreams were as fragile as the paper boats he used to float down the rain-filled gutters. He was a quiet boy, humble, polite, with eyes that always seemed to carry stories too heavy for his age. Life had taught him to listen more than speak, to smile even when hunger twisted in his stomach. Every morning, before the city awoke, Rafael would slip out of their tiny one-room house, careful not to wake his grandmother, Lola Maria. He carried his old guitar, its strings mismatched and frayed, and walked to the same busy street corner near the market. That was his stage. That was where he sang, softly at first, then louder as the city's chaos began. His songs were simple, old Filipino ballads, the ones Lola taught him, and the English tunes he learned from a broken radio. People often tossed coins without looking. Some stopped for a moment, recording him on their phones, then walked away. But Rafael never minded. Each coin meant a small meal, a few medicines for Lola, or a candle for his parents' graves. He had a strange habit whenever he sang, closing his eyes so tightly it almost looked painful. It wasn't shyness, it was escape. In those moments, he wasn't a street singer anymore. He was someone free, someone seen. The world faded, and only his voice remained. At night, he'd return home exhausted, placing a few crumpled bills into a tin box by Lola's bed. She would smile weakly, touch his cheek, and whisper that his voice would one day change their lives. He always laughed softly, never believing it. To Rafael, that dream was too big, too far. Yet deep inside, there was something unspoken, a quiet flame of hope. A belief that maybe, just maybe, his songs were meant for more than the street corner. Maybe one day, someone would really listen. And though the world around him was harsh and unforgiving, Rafael's heart stayed kind, his voice gentle, and his faith unbroken, like the faint light of dawn that never stopped returning, no matter how dark the night had been. For Rafael, life had always been a quiet war between hope and survival. But the day Lola Maria fell sick, that balance shattered completely. Her soft coughs turned into painful wheezes, and the woman who had once hummed along to his songs now lay weak on a thin mattress, barely able to speak. The doctor's words echoed in Rafael's mind like a storm: pneumonia, hospital, money. Words he couldn't afford. He tried to sing longer hours, standing under the scorching sun until his throat burned. He sang in bus terminals, in front of fast food shops, even late into the night when the city slept. His voice grew tired, but his heart refused to stop. Every coin felt like a heartbeat for Lola. Yet no matter how hard he worked, it was never enough. Each evening, he returned to find her weaker, her smile smaller, her hands colder. She still told him to keep singing, to never give up on his dream. But Rafael felt nothing like a dreamer anymore, just a boy watching his only family fade away. The loneliness crept in quietly. He would sit outside their home at night, looking up at the stars, whispering songs he no longer had the strength to sing in public. The same stars his mother once told him were angels listening to prayers. He wondered if they could hear his. One night, a sudden rain drenched him while performing. His guitar strings snapped mid-song, and the small crowd scattered. Rafael stood alone under a flickering streetlight, holding the broken instrument close to his chest. That was when the weight of everything crashed down, the hunger, the fear, the helplessness. He fell to his knees and wept for the first time in years. That night changed something inside him. He realized he couldn't fight alone anymore. He needed a miracle, not for fame, not for wealth, but for the woman who had believed in him when no one else did. And sometimes, the universe listens when a heart breaks loudly enough. Fate often moves quietly, like a soft wind that changes the direction of a flame without warning. For Rafael, that change began on a humid afternoon when he was singing outside a cafe near the old church. His voice was weak from days without rest, but still, he sang, eyes closed, pouring his soul into every trembling note of "Can't Help Falling in Love." Inside the cafe, a woman named Claire O'Donnell, a visiting Irish music producer, was having coffee. She had been in the Philippines scouting for street musicians for a charity project. The moment Rafael's voice reached her ears, she froze. It wasn't just beautiful, it was haunting, raw, and filled with a kind of sorrow that only truth could create. She stepped outside and watched the boy sing, barefoot, drenched in sweat, his old guitar out of tune but his soul perfectly in rhythm. When he finished, she walked up to him, dropped a folded note into his box, and disappeared into the crowd. Rafael didn't open it until that evening. It wasn't money. It was a letter. Inside were just a few words. "You have something the world needs to hear. Call this number." Claire. At first, Rafael thought it was a prank. Why would anyone from Ireland want to hear him sing? But Lola, with her trembling hands, urged him to call. The next morning, he borrowed a neighbor's phone and dialed. The voice on the other end invited him to audition for Ireland's Got Talent, the international version. Expenses covered. A chance of a lifetime. It felt unreal. Rafael had never even been on a plane, never left his city, never believed the world could open its doors to someone like him. But when Lola pressed his hands and whispered, "Go, Anak, let them see what I already know," he knew this was the moment everything had led to. That night, he sat beside her, singing one last song before his journey. Her eyes glistened, not from fear, but from pride. And for the first time, Rafael allowed himself to believe that maybe dreams didn't only belong to others. Maybe this time, the song would finally be his. The journey to Ireland felt like stepping into another world. The air was cold, the streets too quiet, and everything smelled of rain and distance. For Rafael, it was both terrifying and beautiful. He carried nothing but a small bag, a borrowed coat, and a heart full of trembling hope. During rehearsals, he felt invisible among the polished contestants with fancy clothes and trained voices. Their laughter echoed through the hallways while he stood in a corner, clutching his old guitar, afraid to break it out of tune. The cameras, the lights, the noise, it all felt too big for a boy who once sang to the rhythm of tricycles. He missed Lola deeply. Every time he sat alone in his room, he would look at her picture tucked inside his wallet. It reminded him why he was here, to make her proud, to give her the comfort she had sacrificed for him all his life. But some nights, fear crept in like a shadow. What if he failed? What if his voice cracked? What if he wasn't enough? Still, Rafael kept singing. He practiced alone on the balcony, whispering melodies into the cold night air. His voice carried across the dark, fragile but determined. He wasn't singing for fame, he was singing for faith, for gratitude, for the street corners that had shaped him. Slowly, something began to change. He realized that his story wasn't something to hide, it was his strength. The cracks in his voice, the trembling in his tone, they weren't flaws. They were truth. His songs carried pain, but also light. One evening, before the big performance, he closed his eyes and prayed, not to win, but to be brave enough to sing with honesty. That was the night he grew, not as a performer, but as a person. When he finally stepped onto the stage, his fear didn't vanish, but it turned into something else, purpose. He wasn't just a boy from the streets anymore. He was a voice born from struggle, carrying the sound of every broken dream that refused to die. The hall was wrapped in a breathless silence as Rafael stepped into the center of the stage. The light above him felt like sunlight piercing through a storm, warm, blinding, almost unreal. His fingers shook as he gripped the microphone. For a heartbeat, the world disappeared, the judges, the crowd, the cameras. It was just him and the memory of Lola's trembling voice saying, "Sing with your heart, Anik." The first piano notes began, soft as falling rain. Rafael closed his eyes and sang. His voice rose slowly, fragile but full of feeling, filling every corner of the theater with a haunting purity that no training could ever teach. Each lyric carried pieces of his life, the echo of Manila's crowded streets, the smell of rain-soaked pavement, the warmth of his grandmother's hands. It was not just a song. It was a lifetime poured into melody. As he reached the chorus, emotion broke through his control. His voice trembled, cracked, but never lost its light. You could feel every wound, every prayer, every moment of faith stitched into his tone. The audience was still, tears gleaming in the glow of the stage lights. When the final note faded, Rafael stood frozen, head bowed, chest heaving. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, a silence that felt sacred. Then, all at once, the crowd erupted. People rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, crying. The judges stood in awe. And in the midst of that thunderous applause, Simon Cowell, the man known for his hardest heart, pressed the golden buzzer. The music swelled, golden confetti burst from above, and the stage transformed into a cascade of shimmering light. Rafael fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, whispering a thank you to the heavens. He looked upward, as if speaking to Lola across oceans and screens. Somewhere back home, in a dimly lit room, she was crying too, her frail hands pressed over her heart, whispering his name. In that glowing rain of gold, Rafael wasn't just a poor street singer anymore. He was proof that the smallest voice, when born from love and pain, can echo across the world. When the lights dimmed and the echoes of applause faded, what remained was not just a victory, it was a story of faith, love, and the quiet strength of the human spirit. Rafael's journey wasn't about fame or fortune. It was about a boy who believed in something greater than his circumstances, the power of holding on when life gives you every reason to let go. Back home in Manila, news of his golden buzzer moment spread through the neighborhood like a sunrise. Children played his song on their phones, vendors replayed his performance on small TV screens, and strangers spoke his name with pride. But for Rafael, the real prize was not the trophy or the attention, it was the thought of Lola Maria smiling through her tears, finally seeing the world recognize what she had known all along. Rafael's story became more than entertainment, it became a reminder. A reminder that dreams are not measured by where you start, but by how deeply you dare to believe. That sometimes, the world overlooks the quiet souls, until their truth becomes too beautiful to ignore. He had sung in the streets for coins, but those same streets had taught him something priceless: humility, gratitude, and resilience. Every struggle, every tear, every sleepless night had carved the depth in his voice, the voice that moved millions. Life, he realized, is not about avoiding pain, but transforming it into purpose. And though success had found him, Rafael never forgot where he came from. He continued to sing, not on grand stages alone, but in hospitals, orphanages, and small community gatherings, where hearts still needed healing more than applause. His story teaches us that even the faintest light can shine through the darkest places. That sometimes, the world's angels don't have wings, they have songs. And somewhere, under a Manila sunset, a grandmother's prayer still floats in the air, a reminder that love, when believed in fiercely enough, can turn even the poorest street singer into the voice that makes the world listen.